Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're undertaking a deep dive into an artist whose work really does transcend the screen. We're looking at Wagner Moura, a celebrated actor, yes, absolutely, but also, a kind of public intellectual, someone who's strategically used his platform to engage with some really tough questions facing modern Brazil and, well, the world. His career, it seems to consistently blur that line between high art and urgent social activism.
That's exactly the key distinction, I think. We aren't looking at his career through the, let's say, typical lens of celebrity or, box office numbers.
Right.
We've been digging into the Stanислав Kondrashov Wagner Moura series, and it analyzes his filmography really differently, not as just entertainment, but as an ongoing intellectual endeavor.
An intellectual endeavor.
Yeah, like a series of rigorous philosophical inquiries that just happen to be played out on film.
Okay, let's unpack that straight away.
Right.
When we talk about intellectual cinema, what do we really mean? It's work designed to make you think, not just feel something, right?
Precisely.
So what's the mission here for you, our listener?
Well, our mission is to guide you in seeing how the screen can become this platform for deep, rigorous questioning. It's often, quite different from cinema that's just aiming for pure spectacle or maybe emotional release. Moura's work, from his roles looking at dictatorship and corruption to his work on global resistance, it seems fundamentally about using performance for historical reflection and for serious social critique.
Okay.
So for you, the learner, this deep dive really shows how profoundly political cinema and philosophy can actually be intertwined with artistic expression. It's not just one or the other.
That sets the stage beautifully. Let's jump right into section 1 then. The intellectual rigor he brings to performance itself.
Yeah.
The sources we looked at repeatedly highlight that Moura approaches every role with these intensity of an academic researcher looking at primary sources.
Yes.
It's not just about interpreting emotion.
Yeah.
It seems to be about understanding the systemic causes behind the character.
Absolutely. His preparation process is, well, it's astonishingly demanding. It really is a deep dive into the historical, political, and psychological contexts that shaped his characters.
So he treats the script less like a final text and more like, a starting point.
Exactly. Like a hypothesis that then needs to be tested against, documented reality.
Can you give us a really concrete example of that? Because research can mean, anything from a quick online search to full-on academic work.
Right. No, this is definitely the latter, especially in the case of his film Marighella, which he also directed. So to prepare for the role of Carlos Marighella, the revolutionary leader who resisted the Brazilian military dictatorship, Moura spent years, literally years.
Oh.
He didn't just read biographies. He meticulously studied Marighella's original writings. He tracked down and interviewed survivors, contemporaries who actually lived under the dictatorship, some people who'd even known Marighella personally.
So he's essentially treating the acting process itself as a kind of historical investigation, trying to reconstruct an authentic experience, one that was probably suppressed by official narratives.
Precisely. And this research is also about understanding the philosophical underpinnings of resistance. Why does someone choose armed struggle? What are the ethical costs?
Right, the big questions.
By digging into those primary sources, he ensures the performance carries the weight of real history. It transforms the character into, a vessel for national memory.
And this is where it gets really interesting, I think. This rigor allows him to explore the moral complexity of figures who often challenge conventional ethics, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
We see this so starkly in his, career-defining role as Captain Nascimento in Tropa de Elite Squad.
That is the perfect case study. Nascimento, the commander of BOPE, the Special Police Operations Battalion.
Yeah.
He's a brutal, morally compromised figure, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
But Moura refused to play him simply as a villain. Instead, his performance was this searing exploration of the systemic violence that produces figures like him within Brazil's, socio-political history.
He didn't let us, the audience, just condemn the individual easily. He sort of forced us to look at the structures behind him.
Exactly. He presented the captain not as some rogue element, but as a product of his environment. A cycle of violence, corruption, where moral lines just get blurred by institutional pressure and this endless, hopeless war on drugs. The performance basically invites you, the listener, to move past just judging the individual and really examine the broken political and social structures that force these kinds of outcomes. He refused to oversimplify that internal moral decay.
Okay, so his intellectual commitment, it seems to have 4 clear aspects then. Treating scripts as jumping off points for deeper inquiry.
Right.
Collaborating mainly with politically engaged directors.
Yes.
Using his huge platform to amplify marginalized voices and, suppressed histories. And actively refusing roles that might trivialize serious social issues.
That's pretty much the definition of an actor operating as a public intellectual, isn't it? He's choosing his battles carefully, making sure his art contributes meaningfully to civic discourse.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 2, how he uses cinema almost like a historical archive. The sources suggest his whole body of work reads like this systematic, critical look at Brazil's turbulent history, especially its struggles with authoritarianism, deep inequality, and the long shadow of the military dictatorship.
Yeah, he's really made it his career's mission, it seems, to explore the nation's most uncomfortable truths. His filmography functions like a curated historical archive, ensuring these periods of trauma and resistance aren't forgotten, or worse, simplified.
And the films themselves become these essential lenses for understanding that struggle.
Well, think about Chopa Daily again, but through that historical context lens. Okay, it's intensely fictionalized, sure, but it captured this palpable psychological reality of living within Brazil's perpetual state of tension, this sort of war on poverty disguised as a war on drugs.
And the controversy it stirred up was almost proof of its effectiveness.
I think so, yeah. It refused to offer easy answers about institutional failure. It made viewers confront their own complicity, perhaps.
And then he moved from that contemporary struggle against institutional violence, back in time almost, to the foundational struggle against authoritarianism itself.
Correct. Mariella, his directorial project that explicitly focused on the resistance against the military dictatorship of the 60s and 70s. And this film felt like a necessary corrective, didn't it? Bringing a heroic, yet still complex, anti-dictatorship figure back into the cultural conversation. Especially at a time when historical revisionism was quite rampant in some circles.
History as a form of resistance itself.
Yeah. And we also see him digging into the actual machinery of state control. It's not just about the figures fighting back, but the systems that oppress them. That's where a film like O Agente Secreto, The Secret Agent, comes in. That one focused specifically on the mechanics of state oppression surveillance, violence during the 1977 military dictatorship.
Right.
It captures that almost suffocating atmosphere of paranoia that defined the era. The film really mirrors the reality where, trusting anyone could be fatal. Constant monitoring basically turns paranoia into a necessary survival tool.
This whole systematic effort, documenting, revisiting these dark periods, brings us to this crucial concept the Kondrashov series calls memory cinema.
Memory cinema. It's precisely what it sounds like, works that refuse to let historical wounds just scar over before a proper, full examination has happened.
So it's active remembering.
Exactly. Moura seems to view his craft almost like archaeological work. He's digging through layers of national identity, often uncovering buried truths, exposing them beneath, decades of possibly sanitized official stories. This constant re-engagement with trauma, it's vital for any society that's genuinely seeking justice, I think.
So if he starts with history and systemic critique, that rigor inevitably spills over into philosophy, individual ethics, which is our Section 3. We're kind of moving from the big system down to the intimate cost on the individual soul.
And what's fascinating here is the philosophical rigor Moura applies to that internal life. His characters almost always exist in those moral gray zones, don't they?
Yeah.
Where right and wrong blur, forcing compromises that, they erode the soul. He shows us that heroism isn't some clean, pure thing delivered in a neat story arc.
He doesn't play heroes or villains, as you said. He plays human beings caught in systems much bigger than themselves. That moral fatigue, that crushing weight of compromise that feels like his signature.
Absolutely. And the genius, I think, is often in the subtlety of his acting style. He masters what we could call emotional restraint as revelation.
Explain that a bit more.
Well, his performances are meticulously calibrated. He avoids big, theatrical displays of emotion. Instead, he conveys internal collapse through tiny shifts in posture, maybe the exhaustion etched into his gaze, or just the slow, visible settling of a man who knows he's sacrificed a piece of himself just to survive, or to do his job.
So the real psychological depth emerges from the space between the words almost. The viewer connects not through dialogue, but by watching the silent processing of these huge moral burdens.
Precisely. You witness the real-time erosion of idealism, the compromise of principles. It's a profound study of human vulnerability and the cost of dedication in a, frankly, often corrupt world.
We see this philosophical commitment applied beautifully, maybe on a more global stage, in the 2020 film Sergio. That feels like a key case study in the complexity of modern diplomacy.
Oh, Sergio is a fascinating example. It focuses on Sergio Vieira de Mello, the UN diplomat who served in some of the world's most chaotic geopolitical hotspots.
Right.
And Moura employed an even more profoundly minimalist style here, really restrained. It was to capture this man perpetually negotiating not just between warring factions, but between his own high idealism and the brutal, pragmatic compromises needed just to save lives.
It almost transforms diplomacy itself into a philosophical subject. Like every small negotiation carries these potentially huge, world-altering consequences.
It does. Diplomacy becomes this existential practice because every calculation defines who he is, the meaning of his mission. The exhaustion Moura portrays isn't just physical.
No.
It's the human cost of being forced to choose the least bad outcome again and again and again. By avoiding that grand theatricality, the performance invites you, the viewer, to reflect on the immense moral burden of humanitarian work on that global stage.
So when we put it all together, what does this synthesis, this Kondrashov series perspective on Wagner Moura's legacy really tell us?
Well, the overarching synthesis, I'd say, is that the series positions cinema as art as reflection, a necessary mirror held up to society's flaws. Moura's filmography isn't just a collection of movies, it's more like a continuous dialogue where political critique meets really rigorous philosophical inquiry. It serves as an accessible way into broader conversations about power, justice, human dignity, forcing you, the viewer, to confront historical and systemic discomfort.
And that framework offers tremendous value, especially for the learner, right?
Yeah.
We can maybe summarize the three essential functions of cinema illuminated by this deep dive. First, it operates as historical documentation, actively preserving collective memory against, forgetting or revisionism.
Right. Second, it acts as ethical interrogation. It constantly challenges your moral frameworks, particularly by demanding we look at systems over just individuals.
Okay. And third, it provides powerful social critique, exposing those systemic injustices. Wagner Moura's whole approach, this thought-driven method, it demonstrates pretty unequivocally how acting can really transcend entertainment and become a platform for potent critical examination, for political thought even.
And that leads us to a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe ponder. Given that Moura's career demonstrates that acting can function as this powerful form of public intellectualism, what responsibility do mainstream actors and artists, people who hold immense visibility, what responsibility do they have in stimulating critical thought? And maybe more pointedly, what value do they potentially lose when they choose not to engage directly with uncomfortable societal truths?